A big box full of goodies, lots of plants, lots of nice, interesting things. And if you're wondering where to prune and how to develop, this is the place to be. Where should I prune my bonsai? Is an often seen question on fora and in social media. Now, a plant like this, it is quite easy. This branch needs to be cut, right? But what if you just have a younger tree that you're very much in early stages of development and you don't know where to go? Well, you're in luck. I've got a whole box of these and I'm going to go through them, and I'm just going one by one, explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and how it helps in the further development of a young bonsai. But first, let's take this branch off. Actually, why is this branch even here? Well, quite simply said, I wanted to fatten this base a little bit. It was getting quite thin in comparison to the rest of the tree, it being the oldest branch and the slowest growing, so this spring I allowed one of these buds to develop. But take the right tool for the right size. This is actually quite large for such a small branch. I will take a very small set of pliers. And there's no risk of dieback at this point in time, because the tree is so actively growing, it will just heal this over very quickly. This little cut brings us to the first part of answering the question, what should I cut? It depends very much on the growing stage of your tree and what you want to achieve with this tree. This tree is supposed to be very thin, slender, tall growing, with not a lot of heavy branches, and just the lowest branches need to keep up with what is happening on the top. So here it is just maintenance pruning, where I left one whip to thicken up, but I don't want it to get too fat. Now these are all very young trees. They are not really bonsai, they are really just young plants in development. Like this is a walnut that I pulled from the garden last year, and it rooted well. I cut off all the roots at the base, and now it just sits here and I'm not sure what to do with it. It is Japanese maple. It is a cutting from one of my plants. It looks like it is a cork bark variety. An elm tree. Well, what do you do with a tree like this, right? Is this dead? These two elms are brothers and sisters. I found some seeds on the street a few years ago and I planted these, and these are leftovers from other projects that I've done. Tried out. Somehow the watering went wrong. One of the problems is that this is in very organic soil, and once this gets a little bit dry, the water just pours around the edges and the roots don't get all that much water. So if it is really hot and the pot dries out once, it's very difficult to re-water if it just sits in a container like this. Normally I'd say don't do anything to this tree. Later, once it has recovered, once it is again growing nice and healthy branches, then I can cut back a lot further down. The only interesting part is actually this, right? The rest of the tree is just plain, straight and boring. And now the question really becomes, what do you want to do with this tree? Because that will dictate what to cut. Well, let's discuss these options. Basically, I've got a lot of movement here in this lower trunk. So this is the interesting part of the tree. Everything else eventually is going to be cut off. And why is everything else eventually going to be cut off? Well, basically because the character of the lower trunk, the movement, the bends, dictate that this tree is growing in an environment where there's a lot of influence on the trunk growth. Maybe it's very windy, or it is standing somewhere where there is a lot of heat, I don't know, but this has happened to the lower trunk. So the upper trunk is supposed to be moving that direction as well. Well, this is basically all a sacrifice. I'm just going to cut it here. That would dictate that this tree is never going to be a very big tree. It's fine, because then I will get all these little buds that sit on the trunk that are currently dormant. They have no reason to wake up because the upper branches are growing strong, a chance to open up and start growing. The alternative is to say, no, I want to get a very, very big trunk. A very big trunk means it needs to swell up a lot. If I now cut off here, what happens? Well, all this biomass that sits here on the top of the tree is gone. And these are all these solar panels, right? These solar panels, they generate sugars. They take up the sun, convert carbon dioxide and water in sugars. These sugars are then used in the tree to build the rest of the tree. So removing this means that the tree will need to regenerate all that foliar mass before it can grow thicker trunk again. End of July, early August is on the late side. I have another 2 months of growing to go. I don't know how strong this will respond, but there's only one way to find out. Well, these are elms after all, sprouting within weeks. Let's take a look at this young Japanese maple. And this Japanese maple is interesting because, I don't know if you can tell, but here at the bottom there is a big cut. And that big cut means that this has been planted and grown from an air layer. Another thing that you can notice, and I don't know if I saw this on the other tree, but I'll point it out here as well. I grow all these young plants with the Nebari completely covered by soil. What this does is it keeps it nice and humid. And there is a reason for the tree to grow new young roots at the surface level. If I take the soil off, lower it down and expose the roots, I know everybody tells you that you should, but you should not. You should leave the roots below the soil as long as you are building the Nebari. The moment you expose them, new roots will stop forming. And here I think I saw somewhere, deep in the pot, in the Nebari, you see a new white root. This is grown, unfortunately, from the wrong point, because it started right there and then grew underneath this root in there. But this is how the Nebari gets improved, by new roots popping out and filling the lower root ball. So I keep it underground for a very long time. This is material that's excellent for mother and daughter style. You can see this is not the natural shape of this Japanese maple. This Japanese maple was wired as a young whip. This section was grown last year and this section is from this year. This branch will aid enormously in fattening up this lower part if I allow this to be on this tree a lot longer. In fact, I will get a significant jump in thickness between these two sections, because this whole branch contributes to everything between the attachment to the trunk and the roots. It does not contribute to the thickening upwards, because there's no sap flow going into, well, there is sap flow going into the crown, but not as much as you'd expect. So I could leave this on as a sacrifice branch, but what you can already see here as well, this side branch is almost as thick as the trunk, so I actually don't want this to fatten up any thicker. This is a really bad sacrifice, because it sits in a place where I also have a side branch that I would like to keep for the final design. Now the tree becomes a lot clearer. Other things that you see is that here these branches have extended quite a lot, and actually these are larger and thicker than these lower branches. That's no good. So then we go in and we say, okay, which branches do we actually want to keep? Well, if I look at this design, I actually want to keep all the branches. I like all of them, but I don't want them this long. I don't want them this strong. So I start off with the strongest. This is the strongest branch. And I'm just going to bring it back to the first leaf of this year. Here the leaf has gone missing, probably a slug, but I do the same thing. Then I look at this. This could be actually the new leader of the tree, with this as a side branch. So I could leave this alone. But again, I'm going to shorten these here. Why? Well, because I don't want extension at this point. I'm first going to allow this to grow a little bit. This branch can fatten up a little bit to catch up with what's happening up here. So I'll leave this in place. And this I'm also going to leave in place. Now we are in summer. There's going to be quite a bit of thickening. So it is a bit of a gamble to see whether I now want to wire. If I don't wire it now, I know that I'm not going to wire for the rest of the year. So the only thing that needs wire is this one in a little bit of a curve, so it matches this trunk. So this I'm going to wire out, and then I'm going to flip it around, because I think this is going to be the future front with the trunk really coming towards you. You need to make sure it is anchored. So I am using this wire and I go around the main trunk just 1.5 times. Then I reach my little side branch. Now it is anchored here and I can wire this out. And I don't want to wire too tight. So I keep the wire loose and I just hold it a little bit further away from the branch. This is an interesting little elm. It is a cutting from a big elm that I have. And it rooted, but it didn't root all the way around the tree, and it has fallen over since I planted. You can see here roots sticking out of the soil. You can also see here, this is just a head of branches. It is not very nice. There is way too many branches altogether. So ideally I would just cut this off here and start over, or do an air layer at this point so I can make a little clump bonsai. Look, there's not a single plant that you can't find something to do with, right? You just need to be creative. You need to know a little bit about the options that a species offers. It is a little bit late for an air layer, but considering that I'm going to bury it all the way to here, that doesn't matter because it can just stay in the pot, and next year at repotting season I'll just pull it out and then I'll see what's happened. I've brought out a much deeper pot. Let's see whether that's actually deep enough. Barely. I will have to squeeze the roots a little bit, but I think that will work. Now, air layering for a clump. You need to be, of course, as close to the branches as possible, and as much of the thickening needs to be gone because you want all the roots to come out high enough. Bark is gone completely around. Let's remove some more of these stumps. Now this is of course not optimal. The root ball has fallen apart a little bit. On the other hand, it is very good because I want to plant this deep. This area that I've just removed the bark off needs to be fully underground, and this area with all the branches also needs to be covered with substrate, otherwise I don't get roots in the upper part. Now I've compressed this soil quite a bit because I don't want the top cut to be free of soil. This is now just going to go back into the garden. This is not going to go in my forgotten corner. This should go on a bench now. And if the rest of the season is any decent, this should root quite well. And in spring, hopefully I'll remember to pull this out of the garden and show you the roots planted up and develop it further. I'm really enjoying this walk through memory lane because all of a sudden I find plants of which I actually had forgotten that I had them. This looks like a Japanese maple, but I don't think it is. I need to check. There is a maple species that has these leaves that look like a Japanese maple, but it isn't. You can also see the fingers on these leaves. The lobes are a little bit different. Anyway, this is growing really, really nicely. It actually has a pretty decent Nebari. There's one heavy root that I'll need to address, but not now. It's summer. I do that in spring. I wired it out once, so it has a few curves. There's a few small corrections to make. This is a very heavy and straight branch that I don't really need. So I'm just going to prune this back so that this little branch inside has a little bit more power. Clean the cut. Then I go up, and here I have two branches that are opposing, and that's not really a problem right now, but at some point this will cause a swelling. So one of them will need to go. If I then look at the development of this trunk line, you see there's a branch here and here, two of them on the left hand side and one in the back. None on the right hand side. So I'd like to keep this even though it is weaker. I'm just going to remove this one. I'm leaving a little stub because that way this wound heals better. Then I go up, and this is actually quite nice side branch. It is a little heavy, so I'm going to first of all remove the second node and remove half of the leaves so this doesn't get any stronger. Then here in the top I need to decide, there is this split, and there's one here with nice movement, and there was one here that is basically straight. From all directions this is not an interesting split. Unfortunately this has two branches and this one only one, but you know, the top always wants to ramify. Now I've got movement and a little bit of taper. And this I'm just going to reduce because I don't want this long straight section. I want side branches to pop. And who knows, maybe later in the season this will still pop. Given this a bit more sun, it would be nice. In springtime, to develop this further, I'm going to have to pop it out of the pot. You can see also the roots are coming out. And this size is actually too big for this small pot. Then I'm going to reduce the root ball in height and plant the roots wide. But that really is something to do in spring. Although it is now here very cold and wet, I could do it now. I know that I had forgotten about it, so I've now taken a nice pot, not a plastic pot, but a nice cheapish pot, and I'm going to plant it in this. And you can tell here I've actually been repotting loads, and because it is still a very early development pot, I just recycle my substrate for that. Now pop this out of the pot, just like normal, if it wants to come out. Wow, this has been in pot for a long time. Look at those roots. Struggling is a small word. Oh, and it's just a matter of gently going around and around and opening up the root ball, releasing the roots from the substrate, or the substrate from the roots, and then spreading them out, maybe pruning them back. Mind you, it is very wet, it's very cool. Our summer right now is more fall temperatures. In the next 2-3 weeks it's not expected to improve. So ideal for this plant to really quickly regrow in the pot. If you're not experienced, just don't do this. This is really showing you how I develop the stock, not per se when. It's important to know when to do things. And repotting is not easy in summer. In fact, if you're in the wrong climate, this can kill your tree. Now what you can see is that I've grown out this plant in good substrate, which is why I now have a very nice open, loose root ball. This also allows me, of course, the replanting. You see there's young growing tips everywhere throughout the root tips. Furthermore, what you see here is the development of a Nebari, and I have already worked on these roots in an earlier stage. Now this is the big one where I said I don't really like it, and I still don't. So off it goes. Let's see, yeah, that was quite a bit. And now I'm primarily going to prune back these long beards. But not all the way, because I want to plant it quite wide. And then I'm going to go in and I go at the bottom of the root ball. And at the bottom of the root ball, I try to get things as short as possible. So these are the roots that grow from the base of the tree, and I don't really want them. I just want the horizontals. Notice that I'm putting a mound here. And the mound is so that if I take this and I spread the roots out, I can push the bottom of the tree on it and the roots fall down. And now I gently move the tree down and try to get the roots to gently disappear into the surface. I can, of course, with my root hook, make sure that the roots are not tangled up. At the same time pulling out any roots that may have broken off but haven't come out. And gently this way you now have the base for a tree to grow out. Notice I'm going crosswise. These ends are connected and these ends, and I'm now making a little bit of a cross over the pot so that I get along the trunk stability. Trying to put the roots around the wire rather than just squeezing the wire over wherever I want. I do need to protect it from dry winds for a little bit now. A young, not so interesting maple. By the looks of it, probably also air-layered at some point. I don't really know. In the pot for a long time, attracting slugs. And you can tell by the tree wants this branch to grow. So why stop him, right? Just going to go along with what the tree tells me. Take this top out. This is the future top. Make it a nice clean cut here. And then decide, well, which of these two branches am I going to keep? And it doesn't really matter except for this goes up and this goes horizontal. Take this away and right actually, and then make it a quite nice shortcut. Pretty much all that needs to be done. I think eventually it will be planted at an angle like this, but this will need to fatten up a little bit, so I'm just going to leave it alone. My little rescue walnut. It's not a pretty plant. Not sure whether it's ever going to be a pretty bonsai, and I think at some point I'm going to cut it. But of course I can decide, you know, I'm going to just chuck a little bit of wire around it. I put the wire deep in the pot and then gently, loosely wire it out. Doesn't need to be perfect. I certainly don't want it to be tight because this is a plant that I'm probably going to forget for a few months. And I don't want to have big scars straight away. Don't push off the leaf. Right. And then the question is, of course, always how do I bend? Well, you know what? It doesn't really matter as long as it is in multi-directions. So this branch comes out at the outside of a curve. The same here. But yeah, let's not overcomplicate it. But also don't forget, this is very pliable right now. It is middle of the growing season, so it is actually a good time to bend. And just leave this for the time being. Also, this could be potted in a bigger pot next year. Let's see. 2 more of these little rooted elm cuttings. Yeah, what am I going to do? There's not really a lot that can be done. I'm just going to prune this back because this top, look, it's ugly, it's knobbly. There's a nice little side branch here. And I'm just going to give that a little bit more energy. Actually, could wire it up. It's a bit thick, this wire. But it will work. Yep. Actions taken with confidence and at the right time. Look at that. Buds everywhere. And also here on the top, still sprouting. This is doing remarkably well. Well, here you see again there's a big knob, and this big knob is just not nice. That is because it was cut and then a few branches were left to grow. And at this point I could cut it right here. This branch is strong, and here there will be new buds within the next couple of months. If you don't have a lot of trees, you could of course airlayer or root this as a cutting. I'm not going to. This I'm just going to allow to grow. This is an elm, and elms will throw a lot of buds here from this top section. Just wanted to show you what after a few weeks has happened. There's buds everywhere here on these branches, but particularly here at the cut side. Look at how many buds. Look at how many buds there's now popping open. I know this can be frustrating if you're struggling to keep it alive, but really elms, watered and sun, and a bit of fertilizer. Now this is a little Zelkova serrata that I also grew from a cutting. It's not really pretty, it has a lot of movement, but there's no taper at all. I can grow taper with a few sacrifice branches, but this top is way too heavy. Now the question is, if I want to really develop this as a bonsai and grow it out thick, I actually take this out of the pot and put it in a much bigger container, or I can plant it in the ground and just let it run, because the trunk has a lot of movement. At some point I could cut back to here or to there. The alternative is to just keep it in a small pot like this for the rest of its life, allow it to age slowly, and that way create a nice old interesting looking bonsai. But actually this is not an interesting looking bonsai. It would probably be much better if I just allow it to run. In the end I'm going to cut back here probably. I think this is going to be a new top tree, so this is just going to allow it to run. Then I don't need this curve. I want to pop this in a bigger container. I could do that now, middle of the growing season, called slip potting. It's not optimal. And why is it not optimal? Because I then don't work on the roots. I'm not going to combine out and then put it in a bigger pot. The roots are free of the substrate. Fortunately, because of the moss, there are still a few roots, so I'm going to have to fill this up. But before I do, I'm going to remove all this stuff that is growing here, so I can better see it. It is an Arakawa seedling. Now if I look at this, this has a nice curvature to it. This is actually quite a nice little branch, and there's an option for more branches down low. Now the first thing to do is just go through this tree and remove all the little side branches that have just popped up on places where you already have nice side branches. They just create clusters and swellings, and I have already decided that one of these two is going to be used. And now this is cleaned out a little bit better. You can better see it. Then there is triplicates here, higher up in the canopy, but that I'm not going to remove because I first want to see the design of the tree as I make it. Then if I look at the tree, this is a very strong branch, but this makes a nice little curve. And if I plant it up later like this, I have a very nice trunk line. So this branch can actually go. Right. That cleans it out a little bit already. Now, what is the front of my tree in the future? This is going to be the front of my tree, and that's because the curve comes towards you. There's nice little branches here in the front that I could use. The one in the back I therefore don't use. This is a nice side branch that I use, so this I'm not going to use. Then there's some small stuff here in the back that I'm going to remove. That makes this a branch that I'm going to keep. one in the back I am not going to keep because I'm going to allow this to extend towards the front. Then here higher up I've got a cluster of 3-4 branches. Well, the one here is not going to stay. Which ones of these two? Well, this is a small branch in the back at the same level as this one, and these come more to the front. Right. And then reduce these two to 1. Moving up in the tree here, again you see a small little side branch and a bigger side branch, and I don't want the smaller because I want this back branch to develop as a back branch in the tree. Little stub. Now here I want the one to the front to stay, I think. Yes, and then the one in the back goes. Here there's one to the front, one to the side and one up. The one to the front goes. Effectively this I could now completely wire out and place every single branch, but I'll do that in winter. Right, the last 5 pots. I think by now you should have gotten the hang of what I'm doing with these trees, so I'm not going to explain anything anymore. I'm just going to take these, I'm going to prune them out, and I'll allow you to think about what I'm doing and why. And if you want, just drop me a comment down below and let me know why you think I cut certain things and why not, and if you agreed with them. Naturally, if you like this type of videos, I would heavily recommend you to subscribe to this channel, because I really try to make videos that help people in growing their own bonsai over long periods of time. I'm showing techniques, I'm showing how I am doing it, and yeah, I think that would be useful. All cleaned out, plenty of space for more plants. This one is of course going to go on the bench, just like I also don't want to forget this one. Looking pretty good. Anyway, this was just a quick run through with very young plants, how I treat these in summer and how I am doing a slow development on these. You can of course plant them in big containers, you plant them in the ground, but this also works. And this really is my forgotten batch. So these are the worst plants in my collection. And still, I do give them an hour or two every couple of months, go through them, prune them back. And once I decide, yes, I want to do something with it, they have actually improved over time. Bonsai doesn't have to cost the world. Most of these are cuttings or seedlings. And I think all in all, this whole batch probably cost me 10 bucks in substrates and pots. And that's it. So young stock, developing it themselves, and over time it just turns into a nice tree. These are not nice yet, but I have a few other ones, and I'll do a second video when I prune through my nicer, younger stocks, and I'll release that in a couple of weeks as well.